Welcome to Some Guys Talking, everyone. Good to see you. I'm Brian Holler, and this, of course, is my co-host, Aaron Washington.
Hello, everybody.
Aaron,
I hope you're having a fantastic day. Sorry to step on that line.
It's all right. We're good. Anyhow, good to see you and our lovely guest today, Dina Nagib. Hello, Dina. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Our pleasure. Thanks for hopping on with us. Here on the show, Some Guys Talking, we pretty much just talk to decision makers in the space like yourself about how they got to where they are, what they do, what that was like for them personally and professionally. So we're really excited to dig in with you today. Aaron?
Yes, I'm super excited. I'm going to be part of this conversation because you two work together closely. So I'm going to be interested just to hear the dynamic and just your working relationship. So
yeah, should be fun. So let's just start at the top. Ultimately, Dina, how long have you been working officially in cannabis?
I've just gone over my 5-year mark officially.
So you're a veteran. Very good. You're, in 5 years is, I believe, like 47 in cannabis. Is that about right? Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. Very good. So
Great.
5 years in the space. Let's start with the macro and then we'll work backwards. So what is Grass Goddess Consulting and what are your specialties in the space?
Yeah, so Grass Goddess Consulting, we work with dispensaries consulting on software, data, and analytics. So starting with software selection, figuring out the right software to be using and making those decisions, and then moving into implementation. And then once we get the right software in place, then we can really look at the data and implement analytics to grow the business.
Excellent. So it'd be fair to say you're, a technology consultant with specialty in retail.
Yep.
So if you're not talking to Dina or somebody like Dina and you own a retail or multiple outlets or a dispensary or anything closely affiliated with that, I would highly suggest that you do so. Technology is a super important part of everything that everybody does, especially in those environments. So, and I can plug Dina because I know how great of a person she is and how easy she is to work with, but more importantly, how knowledgeable she is. And that's really the key. And it's important to know people like that. And I think it's important to bring attention to the fact that you are you and you do what you do, because I don't think a lot of people really, I think a lot of decision makers in the space still have some confusion around technology, how it works, who to trust, which vendors to trust, all that sort of thing. So I do
how important it is. How important it is.
Yeah, exactly right. So, what are your thoughts on that? In terms of, what I said, kind of the disconnect sometimes between the key decision makers in the space, understanding not just you and what you do, but the sort of macro about technology and how it benefits them in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a great point. It's not something that people that start these businesses really know about or focus on. A lot of small dispensaries are operating with really thin margins, and so they don't have a lot of extra cash to spend on things. So it's really important to make that right decision. But what they ultimately end up making the decision on is oh, I like the sales guy, or I liked, this aspect of it, but not really understanding all of the things that matter, like how the actual point of sale works, how the inventory tracking works, all of those things, how the business functions, which is something that I really take into consideration with who I partner with.
That makes a lot of sense. Ultimately it's it is hard, right? You're operating a retail, you're stretched massively thin. I think sometimes that disconnect is, oh, wait, technology can actually help me. I actually can implement, I can use my budget that I have for these X amount of things and actually translate a piece of it or some of it to a piece of technology that will actually help me scale more effectively and could even be more, and probably is more cost effective.
Absolutely.
And that's I think that's the piece that people forget. And then not to mention just sort of, you own a dispensary, you're not required to, understand every bit of technology that's needed and required to help you grow business, sell products, track inventory, etc. That's a lot. And so that's another place I suspect where you help a lot, is sort of helping educate.
Yeah. And especially for like smaller shops that are competing with the big MSOs, like most of the MSOs have somebody on their staff that does what I do.
Right.
So for the smaller shops that like don't have that person, to really have somebody on their side, I think it's important.
That makes sense. Also a good, viable option for medium-sized businesses. Go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
Dina, can you explain why it's so important, just to, explain to our audience why they need your services, why it's important? Because I think it's one of those things where if they're not sure whether they need it, and then they end up discovering that they really do need it. So can you tell them why they need it before it's too late that they need it? Tell them now.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great thing. And honestly, when people come to me, like a lot of times the reasons why they're coming to me is like, oh, I'm spending too much on this software. Can you help me reduce my spend? Which, yes, I can definitely evaluate it and find probably a solution that is cheaper that would work. But that also lets me see other aspects of the software, of the business, other things that they aren't really thinking about either. So for me, it's really about like getting under the hood of what they're doing. And then, finding ways that they can save money on software, finding ways that we can implement the right data, which is ultimately the key. And what I do a lot of times is like cleaning up dirty data. So I get in, if they've already switched point of sale systems, then their data gets all hosed. So figuring out, cleaning it up, getting them to a good place. And then once we get all of that put in place, then it's really like implementing the right analytics to track the business over time, to understand margins, discounts, which are a big problem in the industry.
And also making it easy for the, people who are running point to understand in a nice, concise way, a dashboard, or, reports, etc., or access to info that's really understandable and quick, and they can action and be agile, right? Like, it's all this, things that you definitely need to be able to, really adjust to the ebbs and flows of the business. I think that's the big key about what you and just technology in general can facilitate, not to mention, preparing you to scale. Like it can facilitate it, or it does, excuse me. So, all right, well, let's start back from the beginning though. So Dina's clearly an expert in her topic. She's worked, in cannabis for 5+ years. Where are you from originally?
I grew up just north of Chicago.
So Illinois. Okay.
Yep. Midwest.
So, Midwest. Did you grow up there your whole time? Did you go to college out there?
No. So I came out to San Diego, which is where I'm currently living. I went to UCSD for college.
All right. Right on.
There we go. So, there we go. So when you were younger, when did the tech bug get you, or did you always have it?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and like definitely was always into computers. I remember the story that like my mom was like, oh, when there's a problem in the computer class, they'll go and ask Dina, that kind of thing. And then I actually worked at Blockbuster my senior year of high school. And I remember anytime we had an issue with the computers, the point of sale systems, it was always myself that was going in there and figuring out what was wrong. So yeah, I would say it's been a thing.
Sounds like it. Usually that's how it develops, right? You just have some propensity for an aspect of it, and that grows and grows and grows. You get opportunities, you continue to sort of build and do things. So was your degree in college technology based?
So I went to college pre-med thinking that I wanted to be a doctor. Pretty quickly figured out that like just the medical school path was not one for me. I did get a degree in biology, and I had an internship my senior year at a pharmaceutical company, which I then worked for the next 11 years.
Wow. And there's the transition, is that job right there, right? And that makes a lot of sense. So, you were thinking med school, you're thinking medical, but in a way, you're still a doctor. You're like a technology doctor.
Yeah.
You know, you assess,
you're helping people get their meds.
Yes, you're helping people get their meds. And on top of that, you're assessing the body, AKA the business, and, and optimizing it for performance, right? So, not too far off. You can certainly see that connection. But I'm pretty sure everybody's going to want us to dig into your pharmaceutical job since you said the magic word. So ultimately, all right, so there must be some interesting segue from, okay, I'm in college. I get my first big job at a pharmaceutical company, right? What did you get hired for initially?
Yeah, so I was working in a lab which is called compound management, and it's basically the dispensary for the pharmaceutical company. So all the chemists make their compounds, give them to compound management that then inventories them, uses very high quality control to dispense them to the biologists and the pharmacologists to do their testing. And my boss actually quit 2-3 months before I was going to graduate, and so they offered me her job upon my graduation.
Doesn't hurt to be in the right place at the right time. That's how that works usually. So that'll work.
That's amazing.
And so then you did that job for pretty much the whole time, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it evolved into a lot. We were the global archive for the entire company. So we had sites in Boston and in the UK and in Canada. And so it grew into this global role that really relied on software, which we developed in-house to grow the operation. So I started the first half of my time there focused on the operations of running it. And then I moved into developing the software that supported it for the second half of my time there.
That makes sense. Well, what a nice, gosh, now hearing everything that you did there, I mean, certainly explains, the segue that you could make considering what you do now. Honestly, super powerful to have a tech consultant that understands product development, that understands, retail, supply chain, understands how to scale because you work for a much larger corporation, I as somebody who has, a little bit of a background that's in that vein, not in pharmaceutical, but enterprise level, been trained how to do sort of things at the enterprise level, right? I'm not sure people understand how valuable that is in cannabis. For some of the same reasons we spoke about people not understanding technology's importance, right? And then of course we could get into the whole, there's, resistance to tradition or to structure or to how business is done, right? So those things I think all factor into making, I think in some ways your job might be more difficult in that fashion. However, once you pass a certain threshold, it's sort of advantageous because you're trusted by, everyone, and then you can really, do what's needed. Do you find that that's, accurate? Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair.
Sure. I mean, that's what I find is that it seems to be the case, I suspect though your journey a little different in a few ways. Ultimately I'd love to know where you're sort of, what inspired you to say, screw this, I'm going into cannabis?
Good question.
Yeah. And there's kind of a lot to that as well. So I've always been a cannabis consumer since college. I actually don't drink alcohol now. I think I'm coming up upon 10 years. I didn't actually track it, but cannabis has definitely served me much better throughout my adult life. In addition to that, while I was working in pharmaceuticals, I controlled the DEA controlled substance license, which was very interesting being a cannabis consumer, which, is kind of an issue there. Fortunately, I didn't get drug tested. But like, it was really in my face how, like, you know, all these other drugs were, you know, fine, and cannabis, THC, you know, all these things were, you know, so restricted. And so I think that that was just sort of like something that was always like a part of my life. In addition, my brother, who still lives in Chicago, he was very involved with Normal there, and really influenced the legislation reform, the medical bill and their adult use bill there.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Did some amazing work, really proud. Their social equity that they built into that legislation at the time was like the most respected in the nation. It, you know,
I remember that.
The implementation always is a little bit different than we hoped.
Yes, there was a lot of excitement because it made a lot of sense at first. We'll just say that.
And didn't work out the way. But anyways, so 2014, when the medical bill passed, I did some work with my brother who was consulting with companies to help them get their licenses. And then in 2019, I did a full application for an adult use dispensary once they had that bill passed. So I have been working in the cannabis space, like in little ways, sort of through him. But I think ultimately, after I left pharmaceuticals and biotech and I took some time, I was like, okay, I can bring something to the cannabis industry that I think is valuable, and I'm going to do that. So that was when I made the change.
That makes sense. You actually were really calculated, you know, like you were able to, you know, segue out in a way that, you know, most people in other industries, right? Which is, oh, I have a, you know, I'm getting some work over here, right? And now you saw an avenue by which you could basically, you know, have your own business, which is cool, and you could apply your trade, you know, in your opinion, it's bear out, you know, into cannabis, you know, and by starting your own business and being a consultant in that fashion,
and bring something that's missing to the industry, you know, something important. That's amazing.
Yeah, you know, and I think you having foresight, you know, understanding that, plus you're like literally right on the front lines of hypocrisy, right? It's just getting pounded into your face every single day by, you know, especially your specific role, you know, not even just the fact, oh, I work in this, you know, pharmaceutical, which is, you know, like that would probably get to me too, as somebody who's been a consumer for most of my life. So, you know, I could understand that, you know, so that was, I'm going to guess you took that as motivation of it, you know, eventually.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the timing worked out. I think, like, you know, sort of where society was, and especially California, like to be able to make the shift, like I do. I feel very fortunate with how it's all worked out.
Yeah, it's nice. You know, it's been great knowing you for, I don't know, a few years now, I think, just a couple, you know, and I do think it's interesting as you continue to grow in the space. Like this is something I would love to, you know, hear about. So, okay, you're here, right? You made the segue, you got enough business going to where you could justify your own consulting firm. You opened it. That's about 5 years ago. I'm pretty sure I can say that you've had steady client work since, you know, or pretty close to that, you know, and now what's next for, you know, well, before we get into that, like what are some of the core fundamentals of Grass Goddess, you know, that essentially you've been able to establish? It's been 5 years. That's a, you know, a decent amount of time and space to do what you do, especially. So that's, you know, and also I think people don't see that there's an effect that you can, you know, work with people to provide, right? You know, a lot of the streamlining of resources can open up a lot more opportunities for said business, right? You know, and you're right there as a trusted resource. So I would assume you take that seriously. Anyhow, so some thoughts about that. I would love to hear.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing, so when I came over to cannabis, I didn't start Grass Goddess right away. So I worked for a couple of the point of sale companies first. I really sort of like started in like an entry level onboarding position at these point of sale companies to really understand the process and what's important. And then as I sort of grew at those companies, I built processes for data handling and that kind of stuff. And then I started Grass Goddess Consulting because I really felt like there was this this issue with, software companies have a really hard job because they have to redevelop the software for every different state because they're all have different requirements. And
Yep.
so, there's only so many shops, like only so much way to make money. So it's a hard position for them to be in. And then dispensaries, as we've already talked about, with super thin margins and,
Yeah.
so just really bridging that gap and being somebody that advocates for the retailer in that situation. So I think coming back to your question, like as far as principles that are really important to Grass Goddess, I definitely like we're women owned. That's really important to me. Also analytical, like that is one of the key things to me, that we're analytically minded.
Sure.
Also operating from a place of grace, especially with the software transitions, those are painful. I was actually using this example yesterday. Like, I think we've all like gone to the doctor's office or something and they're like, oh, we're in the middle of changing our software right now, so bear with us. Right? And it never
Every single time, the last 3 times I went to the doctor, they're like, you have to bear with us. We have new software now. And you're just sitting there. Yeah, go ahead. Carry on. Sorry. Nerve with me with that one.
No, it sucks for everyone. It sucks for the people operating the business.
Yeah,
It sucks for the people, shopping.
happy all around. Exactly right.
So that's one of the things is like, and I focused my entire career on change management. So really like coming from a place of like, what you're going through is tough. I'm here to support you. So yeah, I think those are kind of some of our like most important pillars.
Yeah, those are fantastic. They certainly align with several organizations, that I'm aware of and know, and I share all those values too. So, pretty cool. Absolutely right. Let's talk about application of said values, though. Ultimately, we're in cannabis. It's tough. It's up and down. Also, a lot of us work on our own. Well, I mean, we have teams, but we're remote a lot. We see each other at events and travel to meetings, maybe stuff like that. But, how do you manage that? Not just in terms of strategy to grow, right, as a professional, but personally, I know as a fact, I can get, sometimes lonely. You can overthink things. You might not be as structured with certain clients or an org, and so it lets your mind wander. How do you address some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of went through it with like COVID and remote work and, trying to figure out things to like stay connected. And then I think with like starting my own business shortly after that, it's something that I've been very aware of. And I work very well on my own, but having people that I trust that I can, meet with regularly and
Sure.
confide in and talk through difficult problems. I think that's one of the things that I realized when I started working with clients. And I was like, wait, like this is what I think should be done, but like, can I test it with somebody else? And you don't want your client to see that. So you have to sort of figure
Right, who do
out.
I've got, right? Yeah.
And I do think that like collaboration in the cannabis industry is so important generally. I think the past year, it's a theme that's come out of a lot of like the conferences that we've been going to, and that like it's the way, especially for people that aren't working for these big multi-state operators, that
Right.
we can come together and, build the industry that we think, is what we need and what matters.
Yep.
So yeah, I do think that those partnerships help me professionally with my business and also personally as well.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more. I mean, that's all of us here. This is very familiar to us, right? It's a Google Meet or a Zoom or or things like that, right? You're not. I couldn't agree with you more about when you find people you can trust. When there's a click there. I've always been, and I know you're this way too, because we talk all the time. But when I meet somebody like that, even if there's not a direct correlation, like, oh, we can't do business right away, right? I still try to make a regular, I mean, especially if there's a want to there, obviously. You're getting along, it makes sense. Um, I always want to try to create a regular cadence with folks like that if I can, right? Every other week. And hey, no big deal. You're swamped and you've got something going on. Just touch base for 5 minutes, or just, hey, we can punt that week. But ultimately, it's always on the calendar a little bit, you know? And you can always either look forward to it. Sometimes, you know, it's a break in the day. You know, I don't know. Do you want to speak to the importance of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're great at doing it, Brian. Like I've talked to other people too that are like, Brian's just so good at like staying connected to people and making sure that you have that space, which I agree. It's really important. And it's something that we've prioritized in our, you know, relationship working together. And it's something that like, when we do have a meeting scheduled, I don't think we're always like, oh, this is what I'm going to talk about. But then we get in there and we start talking about what's going on and something important comes up. It's also a meeting in my day that I can show up too high to and not feel bad about.
Yep, that's true. That doesn't hurt. You're not wrong. And it's ours happens to be nicely placed right in the middle of the day. So it's kind of convenient in that regard. You know, Aaron, it's how you and I, you know each other. You know, we got introduced by a trusted source. We started talking.
Absolutely.
You know,
and many a time there was a joint burned or something going on when our meetings.
There often
how
is.
The whole show started. Just us.
That's right.
Happen about.
Just Aaron, you know, on our weekly calls, smoking joints and talking about what we do in our lives, and we're just like, wait a second, we can just do this with people, and this is pretty cool, and you know, and this is fun, and we could now look at us talking to Dina on the Beard Bros Media Network. You know, okay, we're just gonna keep chugging away. You know, I can't. First of all, thank you so much for the kind words. That was really nice of you to say. But you know, I get as much certainly out of our conversations as you do, if not more, and I love the fact that that's something that exists in our space. You know, I do think it's funny. I was talking with somebody yesterday and we were talking about, you know, oh, it might be interesting once things do become more predictable and streamlined and opened up and legalized, because maybe there won't be a need for this. And I'll be like, and I was like, well, there's always a need for this in every single field, no matter what. But I get the point though. Right. The point is like, well, as things get structured, it'll feel like we need it less. Maybe that's the case. But the fact that we've built these relationships over time as that comes, I cannot tell you the power in that, not even just from personal perspective, but most certainly to your larger point, that professional perspective. I'm telling you right now, it will allow people who you won't see coming to compete with existing resources and services and businesses. And so there's a very real business case for this, in addition to the touchy-feely stuff, which is, of course, is important. So, Dina, yeah, and I just, I'm very happy about that. You know, like I'm very glad that, you know, that's something that we do. So let's talk about the future. So here we are, you know, Grass Goddess, you know, getting clients, hit Dina up if you, especially are a retailer or even a manufacturer or a brand that is trying to make sure that they can sell well and be streamlined with their resources. So please hit her up. You should. Anyhow.
Because we have no problem hitting our audience over the head. You need Dina services, all right? So right here, you need information is important, all right?
That's right. Yeah. There's all sorts of ways. Like when you see this show, there's going to be links and all sorts of stuff. You'll see promos for this and clips. Dina will be tagged. Click the thing and talk to her right here. That's how that works. You know. Anyhow. So yeah, what's next for Grass Goddess? What's on the horizon, and what are we looking to do to continue to grow?
Yeah, I'm working on some really cool stuff, building some dashboards, working with APIs to pull data and try to grow the services that we offer. So I'm really excited about that going into next year. I also have a blog that I send just like after I go to a conference or when there's a topic that I want to talk about. And a lot of times it gets a little bit into some of the medical stuff as well and more with like different cannabinoids, because that's something that I'm really passionate about as well. So I would like to incorporate that somehow more into the Grass Goddess brand, but haven't totally figured that out yet. So stay tuned for whatever that becomes.
Well, that's certainly something we could chip away on our weekly conversations, I think. But you know, ultimately, that's really cool. great that you're essentially have, key core services and tools, right? That simply just need to be perfected, more optimized, right? More ingratiated, looking for different ways to continue to grow. That's, I think, a piece that I know we've spoken about before a lot is the idea that it's not just set it and forget it. It's evaluate, build the machine, right? And that's a really big lift once you can do that. The machine is built, right? We have our dashboards. We know what we're looking for, right? It does not stop there, right? Talk about that piece. Talk about how you help people understand that through what you do.
And I'm a big believer in iteration and doing something small and testing it and figuring it out. One thing we didn't talk about in between pharmaceuticals and coming over to cannabis, I was a product manager at a biotech company for a year. I started in a field scientist position and then became a product manager. And so I like to use that as like my example for like when I'm developing, this platform that we're working on right now. Right. And, scope creep is something that's real. So I definitely like to focus on small, manageable things that you can measure, figuring that out, and then going from there and figuring out the next thing. I think that that's a really important way. If you do like try to build the entire rocket ship and not like, figure it out how the boosters work and, certain things first, I think you're going to get into outer space.
You must test and iterate and test and iterate. Yeah, you're not wrong there. And people don't have patience for it, but they have to. They should. It's well worth the, what happens on the other side of that, to your point. So yeah, it's tough to implement. I mean, another thing that's occurring to me is you also have project management experience. So, you know how to operate, or at least you have a general idea of how to operate and or scale pretty much any business. And that's something we have in common. And that's something I think we talk about a decent amount is, how to continue to leverage our resources to, potentially help. And it's pretty cool that way. So, so you're ready to rock for next year. Are you looking forward to Vegas next week? This will be funny to hear about when we post this. This episode will come a few weeks after Vegas. So.
Yes, I am excited for Vegas. My calendar is kind of out of control, but that's how it's supposed to go, I think. And I'm doing my first talk in the industry. It's a fireside. Thank you. It's a fireside chat with a good friend of mine, Sarah Falvo, who's putting on an amazing women's event, Smoke and Flower. So yeah, I'm thrilled that I'm talking about dirty data and all the things that I do with my clients. So hopefully it'll be helpful to people there. Yeah, I think Vegas is going to be great. And then next year, it's going to be a wild ride. I'm excited.
How do I get invited to that? I want to hang out with the ladies. Those they have like brunches and stuff. I'm like, come on, why can't you invite men or me? No.
Yeah. I'll tell you the trick to get in, Aaron.
Yep. Right. Yes. Well, what's also cool, Dina, is so stereotypes about people who are tech savvy tend to be right. They're more introverted, that sort of a thing, right? Also, and this is not about introverted or extroverted. A lot of times, companies that are or consulting firms that are focused on a niche sometimes don't see the need for things like content or being at events or like a kind of a robust marketing or social strategy, right? I would always argue that they should, no matter who the hell you are. I don't understand why you would neglect this, but point is, people do. Or we understand trying to cut corners, or your budgets are tight. So I get that, and marketing can be an expense. Technology already is, etc. So, what made you sort of decide to put some emphasis on, I'm going to do a blog. I'm going to be at events. I'm going to be more proactive in networking. I'm going to be proactive in setting up weekly or bi-monthly appointments with people who I trust, and I want to pursue. What sort of, made you, what inspired you to do that?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, when I started Grass Goddess Consulting, I sold my condo. So, I was making a big jump, but I had a runway. So I was like, I want to do this the right way.
Sure.
And for me, it was about building my network and finding the right people in the industry rather than just going after the next client, because I did want to have good clients as well. So that was something that I really prioritized, going to conferences. And then as I started to do that and trying to make it feel like worthwhile as well, and that I was doing something like valuable. So, and I just started writing and posting stuff and then posting on LinkedIn, and I got great response, and I got other consultants that were like, I read your blog post, it's really interesting. But I think the other thing that really got me to start with the blog was, I think in cannabis, it's really important to be authentic and to show like what's important to you. And so that's honestly what I'm trying to do with my blog, is just like let people get to know me. These are the things that are important to me. This is what I'm going to talk about. And so trying to like build my authenticity that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that's exactly like I recommend that people do that. A part of what I've done in my past is try to help people figure out how to do that for themselves, right? But agreed. I think that especially in cannabis, people want to trust you. People need to know you. They're going to ask you maybe more things than in other business lanes about your personal life, your beliefs, even your family, to a degree. If you're not comfortable talking about those things, you should try to get comfortable talking about those things, because it's for sure going to be asked of you in private conversations when you're exploring partnerships or working together. Things like that. It will, and it's different. I've been in other fields enough to know it's different. It's more personal for sure here. And we all understand the many reasons why, so it's really great to hear somebody like you, Dina, talking about how you can emphasize that in your way, from your perspective, to also align with what you do for business. I think that's admirable, and I think it's most what people should try to do. Especially in our space, you could be like, it's proactive. Like, part of the reason Aaron and I want this show is to be proactive in that way, right?
Yeah.
Hey, learn about these people, learn about how well-rounded they are, learn about their experiences in the space, learn about them as people, right? Like that. All this wasn't easy for you. There was ups and downs. There's tough times. It still is, right? How do you negotiate that? I mean, besides cannabis, which obviously helps, but a little. How do you kind of center yourself? Like, what do you do to mitigate the ebbs and flows of this industry for yourself?
Well, I dance, Brian. That's
I know
pretty
you do. I was
much,
hoping you would say that. So
pretty much the big thing. I
that
danced
is.
my whole life.
Expand.
And I love it. I do right now. I've been doing cardio hip hop. I do a cardio jazz funk class. I took a cardio burlesque class recently. They're mostly cardio, just keep moving and dancing. But I smile so much when I dance. And I actually, when I was working in pharmaceuticals, I worked for this one supervisor for probably like 7 of the years that I was there. And she was amazing. And I learned a lot from her. And she could tell if I was not going to dance class by my mood. So that always sticks in the back of my mind. And I'm like, wait, Dina, are you starting to be short with people? Are you
Go dance?
like,
Time to dance. Exactly right. I mean, ultimately, that's to be self-aware though. In that way, is awesome as well. To know yourself well enough to know that. That's a big deal. Just even getting there and then being able to be proactive about it is even better. Right? So, and I can imagine dancing checks off a lot of boxes, right? It's not cannabis. It's active, right? And it's fun. So fun, healthy, and not about cannabis and active. That's some pretty good stuff to distract you from the ups and downs in a good way.
Usually that's how I know when I am feeling it, when I am high, when it's like, oh, I kind of want to dance. I'm like moving. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it is. That's a little sign. That and the giggles. But anyway, I digress.
Those are definitely good signs though. Like, cannabis can sort of help bring that out of you, especially if you're, right, having a really rough day. It can be sort of the impetus to get you to go, oh, I should go dance. You know,
And honestly, I used to be so hard on myself dancing if I made a mistake or something. And since I incorporated cannabis into my dance practice, it's so much better. Like I just laugh at myself and it helps me focus. It's been amazing.
so great. You know, I mean, it's so important for people to have other things like that, whatever that is for you, you know, that's outside of it. And I especially think so for people who are like us, where, you know, you're working 60, 70 hours a week, maybe, and, you know, it's crazy and you always have to be on call for things and all this crazy stuff. It's super important to like purposely work that time into your life. So,
And can I just say this just really quickly, Dina? And I think it's important to share that aspect and that part of yourself, because I think, you know, a lot of times in cannabis, we look at an individual by their job and what they do, and that defines them. And it's so, I love it. Like people that I know through LinkedIn that I know that they did, you know, that their interests are these other things. And it's like, that is awesome. Like those are the things, because again, we get so, this is a CEO, this is a consultant, this is a, but there's so much other stuff. And the great part about the blog is that people won't know the stuff about you unless you tell them. And this is the stuff that people want to know. Like they want to know. So I applaud that. I think that that's great. And I think that we all should really go beyond that, you know, just what people, here's the thing. I wrote this down to myself. I write myself notes every time. And right before I went to sleep the other night, it's like, we need to not take ourselves so seriously. I know what we're doing is serious and there's a lot, but it's weed. Like we need to not take ourselves seriously. So I appreciate that, because we're all more than just, you know, whatever our title is. And so,
yes. You know, Dina, thank you so much for being with us today. It was really awesome to hear, you know, your journey from your perspective and a lot about Grass Goddess and you and your background. We really thank you for being with us today. You know, please let everybody know where they can find you and where they can, you know, see Dina and Grass Goddess.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. I've had a blast. So we're on LinkedIn, Instagram, grass_goddess_consulting, and also grassgoddessconsulting.com.
Yes, and it's Nagib. And make sure to hit her up if you need, well, just about anything. So please hit Dina up. Dina, thank you so much again. We appreciate you. Have a great day and a happy holiday.
thank you.